The year is 1888. A chill wind swept through Ravenwood, a village shrouded in perpetual gloom. Towering pines and dilapidated Victorian houses exuded an aura of decay and wrongness. A lone figure emerged from the forest, silhouetted against the dying light. Ethan Blackwood, a young cartographer, stumbled into Ravenwood, feeling a primal fear. The villagers, gaunt and pallid, watched him with unsettling intensity. Ethan's boots echoed on the wooden floorboards of the Blackwood house. Mayor Blackwood, a tall, gaunt man, insisted Ethan stay as a guest. The house creaked around him, a symphony of groans and sighs. The dining room was oppressive, a long table set for two. Mayor Blackwood, with a predatory cheerfulness, poured Ethan a glass of dark wine. Ethan's unease grew with every tick of the grandfather clock. The mayor's questions became more probing, more personal. Ethan excused himself, citing exhaustion, and was led to a guest room. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled into a nightmare. Sleep was a fickle mistress that night. Ethan rose before dawn, unable to bear the confines of the guest room. The village of Ravenwood was shrouded in a thick, ethereal fog. Ethan reached the village square, noticing figures shrouded in shadow. The villagers formed a loose circle around him, their eyes cold and calculating. Mayor Blackwood emerged from the fog, his face a mask of affable menace. Ethan forced a smile, gripping the knife beneath his coat. The mayor spoke of Ravenwood's unorthodox traditions, his eyes never leaving Ethan's face. The fog swirled around them, amplifying the whispers of hunger and darkness. The mayor clapped his hands together, a sharp, startling sound that shattered the uneasy truce. The villagers, as if puppets brought to life, moved in unison. They swayed and chanted, their voices low and guttural, weaving a tapestry of sound that was both hypnotic and terrifying. Ethan watched, transfixed, as the villagers formed a circle around a crude altar of stone. It was stained dark, almost black in the center. The stench of blood, old and metallic, wafted from it, making Ethan's stomach churn. He fought the urge to gag, his senses reeling from the onslaught of sights and smells. The chanting intensified, reaching a fever pitch. The mayor, his eyes gleaming with fanaticism, produced a long, curved knife. It glinted wickedly in the pale light, reflecting the sickly yellow of the rising sun. The villagers fell silent, their gazes fixed on the knife, their bodies trembling with anticipation. Ethan's hand tightened on his own blade, hidden beneath his coat. He had to do something, had to escape this madness, but his feet felt rooted to the spot, his mind paralyzed by a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. He was a moth drawn to a flame, knowing it would be his doom, yet powerless to resist its allure. The mayor, with a theatrical flourish, raised the knife high above his head. "Embrace the gift," he roared, his voice echoing through the silent square. "Partake in the bounty." A collective gasp rippled through the villagers. Ethan, his heart pounding, followed their gaze. Two men, faces contorted in terror, were dragged into the circle. The mayor, face alight with terrible joy, gestured towards the captives. "Lost travelers," he proclaimed, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Ethan watched in horror as the villagers bound the men's hands. "Silence," the mayor boomed, his voice cracking like a whip. The villagers obeyed instantly, their gazes fixed on their leader. Ethan felt a surge of anger at the injustice unfolding before him. He had to act, even if it meant risking his own life. Section 3, The Hunt. The mayor, oblivious to Ethan's turmoil, continued his macabre sermon. He spoke of ancient pacts, of sacrifices made to appease the spirits of the forest, of the blood price that had to be paid to ensure the survival of their village. His words, a bizarre mixture of religious fervor and cold, calculating logic, sent chills down Ethan's spine. He knew then, with chilling certainty, that these people weren't worshiping any deity he recognized. They were appeasing something far older, far darker, something that lurked in the shadows of the forest, something that demanded a terrible tribute. And that tribute, Ethan realized with a sickening lurch in his stomach, was human life. As the mayor prepared to plunge the knife into the heart of the first captive, Ethan made his move. He drew his own blade, the steel cold and reassuring in his hand. "Stop," he roared, his voice echoing through the silent square. The villagers whirled around, their faces contorted in surprise and rage. The mayor, his hand frozen in midair, stared at Ethan with an expression of incredulous fury. "You dare interfere," he hissed, his voice dangerously low. Ethan ignored him, his gaze fixed on the villagers. "These men have done nothing wrong," he shouted, his voice trembling with adrenaline. "Let them go." His words were met with a chorus of snarls and hisses. The villagers, their eyes burning with a primal hunger, began to advance on him, their hands reaching for the crude weapons they carried. Axes, scythes, sharpened farming implements. Section 4, A Glimmer in the Darkness. Ethan stood his ground, heart pounding. He couldn't fight them all, not here. But surrender wasn't an option. He had to create a diversion. Glancing around, he saw the dark woods at the village edge. It was a desperate gamble, but his only one. "Run!" he roared at the captives. They hesitated, then scrambled to their feet. The villagers turned to chase, giving Ethan his chance. He lunged towards the woods, not looking back. The forest welcomed him, its darkness a stark contrast to the village. He had escaped, for now, but he knew this was just the beginning. Ethan ran until his lungs burned and his legs ached, the sounds of the village fading behind him. The forest, once a place of refuge, now seemed to press in on him. He stumbled upon a clearing, a circle of bare earth surrounded by ancient gnarled trees. A fire blazed in the center, casting flickering shadows. The air was thick with the smell of roasting meat. As his eyes adjusted, he realized with growing horror that he was not alone. The villagers were there, their faces hidden by dark hoods. They were feasting, tearing into chunks of meat with their bare hands. It was the captives, their flesh charred, their bones picked clean. The mayor looked up, his gaze meeting Ethan's across the clearing. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face, sending a shiver of pure terror down Ethan's spine. "Ah, Mr. Blackwood," the mayor boomed, his voice echoing through the clearing. "So glad you could join us. We were just enjoying the fruits of our labor." Ethan stood frozen, his mind reeling, his body refusing to obey his commands to flee. He could only watch in horrified fascination as the mayor gestured towards the feast. "Come, come," he beckoned, his voice dripping with false congeniality. The villagers, their faces hidden by their hoods, turned as one, their eyes like burning coals in the darkness. He was surrounded, trapped, with no escape from the nightmare he had stumbled into. "We've been expecting you, Mr. Blackwood," the mayor continued, his voice taking on a strange sing-song quality. "An escape from death, at a terrible, terrible price." The fire crackled, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. His mind screamed for him to run, yet he felt a strange pull towards the flames, towards the darkness that beckoned from the heart of Ravenwood. Ethan's hand trembled as he reached for the knife the mayor offered, the polished bone handle slick with something he didn't want to identify. The firelight danced in the blade's reflection, a macabre twinkle in the heart of the darkness. He had a choice to make, one that would seal his fate forever. Refusal meant certain death. He had seen their hunger, their ruthlessness. They wouldn't hesitate to add him to the pyre, to turn him into another offering to the dark entity that ruled this place. His stomach churned at the thought, his senses assaulted by the sights and smells of the feast. Yet the thought of joining them, of becoming one of these monsters, filled him with an even deeper revulsion. To survive by sacrificing his humanity, his very soul, felt like a fate worse than death. He would become a prisoner in his own skin, forever haunted by the faces of those he had condemned, those he had devoured. He closed his eyes, drawing a shuddering breath. The chanting of the villagers swelled, a cacophony of voices urging him towards the abyss. He could feel the weight of their gazes, their anticipation thick in the air. Time seemed to stretch, each second an eternity as he growled with the impossible. "Choose wisely, Mr. Blackwood," the mayor purred, his voice a silken thread in the tapestry of madness. "There's no turning back from this path." Ethan opened his eyes, a new resolve hardening his gaze. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. He would face his end on his own terms, defying the darkness that held Ravenwood in its grip. With a swift, decisive movement, he tossed the knife aside. The villagers stared at him, with disbelief and fury. You choose death over life? Ethan met his gaze without flinching. And I'll have no part in it. A collective growl rippled through the villagers. Ethan closed his eyes, a strange sense of peace settling over him. The darkness that consumed him was absolute, all-encompassing.